I commonly hear from those struggling with high functioning anxiety that you feel like a failure and as though everything that you do is never good enough. You're not alone in feeling this way, and it can feel extremely disappointing and discouraging when you're constantly chasing success and happiness, but you feel as though you will never reach a point of fulfillment and satisfaction. It doesn't have to be this way. And you don't have to change your job or your lifestyle unless you want to, of course. But you just have to change your mindset and the way that you speak to yourself. And that's what I'm going to talk all about in this episode: how to stop feeling like a failure and recognize your worth. Welcome to Calmly Coping. My name is Tati, and I am a licensed therapist and a high functioning anxiety coach. I specialize in helping high achievers overcome high functioning anxiety so they can finally stop overthinking everything. If this topic interests you, then please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you get notified every time I release a new video. Thank you so much for tuning in. So first, let's talk about why you feel like a failure all the time. Reason number one is that you're probably focusing more on the negative than on the positive. As humans, we have a negativity bias, which makes us more sensitive to negative things and more prone to focusing on the negative. This function is that it helps to protect us. It protects us from danger. It protects us from making the same mistakes over and over again. But the downside to this negativity bias is that it's so much easier to focus completely on the negative and view yourself in all or nothing terms, which I made a video about that entire topic. If you're interested, I'm going to put a link right here. But it makes you focus so much on all or nothing terms that you view yourself as being a failure rather than seeing the complexity of everything that you've accomplished. It's easy to focus more on the negative and what you haven't yet accomplished or where you still want to be and the times that you've failed in the past, rather than patting yourself on the back for the things that you've done well. Part of this can be that I think a lot of times people have a fear of being viewed as conceited or full of themselves or being overconfident. And so to overcompensate for that fear, then you might focus more on being more quote unquote humble or being more relatable to people and commiserating in your difficulties and the things that aren't going well, because this can be a way of relating to others. But on the other hand, this makes you focus more on the negative. And so this might be a reason why you feel like a failure, because you are mentally exaggerating the things that you aren't doing well, the times that you've failed in the past, the things that you have not yet accomplished, rather than focusing on all of the amazing and positive things that you are doing every single day and the things that you've accomplished throughout your life. So that's one reason why you may struggle with feeling like a failure. Another reason why you might struggle with feeling like a failure is that you might have unrealistic expectations for yourself. So whether these are time-based expectations, so maybe you expect to accomplish way more in a shorter amount of time than might be realistic. Or if you just have expectations of perfection, which is of course an impossible and unattainable expectation or goal. Or maybe you have expectations for yourself to do things in a specific way. And even if the way that they end up happening isn't a failure or isn't that things aren't going well, you're still focusing on it as a failure because these expectations did not meet what you had originally planned out for. So one example might be if you plan on getting a job at a specific company or doing a certain thing, and this job interview doesn't work out, but you get a job doing something that is maybe comparable. And you're so fixated on this expectation that you should have gotten this other job that you're focusing more on what could have been or what you think should have been rather than what actually is, even when what is still an accomplishment. So this can be unrealistic in the sense that not everything is going to always work out the way that you planned it to or the way that you anticipate it. So this might be another reason having these unrealistic expectations as to why you feel like a failure. And reason number 3 as to why you might feel like a failure is that you might have a fear of not being good enough. So internally, you might feel some insecurity, or you might feel some doubt within yourself that what you do isn't going to be received well by others, or it's not going to get you to the places that you want to be. And so you're constantly putting this pressure on yourself to perform better and to do better in everything that you do. And so this excessive pressure of perfection that is helping you to correct for this fear of not being good enough is then resulting in you feeling like it's never good enough, regardless of what you do, no matter how much you accomplish. This underlying fear of not being good enough is going to result in you feeling like a failure because it's never going to measure up or feel like it's enough. So when you don't feel like you're good enough from within, it doesn't matter how much you accomplish externally, how much validation you receive from others, because this internal dialogue and belief that you have is constantly going to be overriding and coloring all of these external things that you're receiving. So this might be another reason why you feel like a failure. I want to first explain this concept to help you understand how you can stop feeling like a failure and how you can start to recognize your worth. And this concept is that it's not what happens, but it's how you think about what happens. And this is a mindfulness concept that is known as the second dart. So let's say you're struggling with something currently, like you got negative feedback from a colleague of yours. This would be considered the first dart that has essentially shot you and caused you suffering. So this first dart is the thing that happens that you don't have control over. So you got negative feedback from a colleague of yours, and that's going to automatically result in some difficult emotions, of course, because it doesn't feel good to hear things like that. The second dart is how you think about it. So the second dart would be the suffering that you create yourself on top of the suffering that is already there. So this might be the thoughts that you have. When you get this negative feedback from a colleague, maybe you're thinking, well, I should have done better, or there's something wrong with me, or nobody ever says anything positive about me. Any of these negative thoughts that you might have are you creating and adding more suffering and more difficulty onto your experience. So this is a concept that I think is going to be helpful to help you to understand how you can stop feeling like a failure. Because you cannot control the things that happen to you. You cannot control the outcomes of certain things that you put effort into, but you can always control how you choose to think about and respond to these things that happen. And so that's what we're going to focus on, because the way that you choose to think about what happens to you is what results in you feeling like a failure, feeling like you're not good enough, being hard on yourself, all of that. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I want you to focus on when it comes to starting to recognize your worth so you don't feel like you're a failure. Some ways that this might show up, these negative types of thinking that result in feeling like a failure, is when you ignore progress and instead focus on what you need to improve or fix. So having goals and having things that you want to accomplish is excellent. That is not a bad thing. But when you're focused more on what you constantly need to work towards and ignoring your progress, that's going to put you in this constant race where you're constantly trying to achieve something that is unattainable, because there's always going to be the next step and the next thing. So that's why it's important to acknowledge your progress. And I'm going to share more about how to do that in the tips that I share later in this episode. Another type of negative thinking that can result in you feeling like a failure is when you attach your self-worth to what you do and to your achievements. So when you feel as though the things that you do and accomplish, maybe how busy you are, how successful you are, is a reflection of your self-worth, then this can result in you feeling like a failure, because then regardless of what you do, that's going to be the barometer, so to speak, that is determining how you feel about yourself. So rather than feeling fulfilled from within because you have positive self-worth, You are dependent upon all of the things that you do and all of the outcomes that happen. And that's going to put you in this roller coaster of emotions and roller coaster of insecurity because the way that you feel about yourself is so unreliable and all over the place. And the third type of thinking or belief that might result in you feeling like a failure is when you see failure as something wrong, because failure is essential and failure is the only way that you learn. I watched a Bob Ross documentary recently, and he is a painter who was famous for his TV series where he painted landscapes. And he refers to mistakes that people make as happy little accidents. And I know this is something that has become like one of his most famous lines throughout the times. And I love this phrase because it helps to reframe the way that we look at failure or at making mistakes. That nothing is a mistake or a failure, but there can always be this silver lining that helps you to learn and grow. And of course, accidents happen and things don't work out as you might have planned or anticipated, but that does not mean that all is lost. And in fact, failure is a method for you to grow. And oftentimes we learn more from times of difficulty and times of failure or making mistakes than we do from the times that we do well, because that is how we learn to reassess and really reflect on the way that you are doing things. So I want you to think of Bob Ross and happy little accidents, and the next time that you are inclined to use the word such as like mistake or failure. Now, before we get to my 5 tips on how to stop feeling like a failure so you can recognize your worth, I want to quickly talk about my free challenge that I have coming up. This is a free 3-day challenge that is taking place from September 15th through September 17th, 2021 on how to cultivate calm from within. In the challenge, I'm going to be taking you through how to cultivate a positive mindset, healthy habits and routines, and how to set healthy boundaries so that you can feel calm from within while still being ambitious and high achieving. If you want to learn more about this free challenge and register, then go to calmlycoping.com/calm challenge, or you can click on the link in the description below. So now here are my 5 actionable tips to help you stop feeling like a failure and recognize your worth. Tip number 1 is that what you focus on grows. So when it comes to your perception, if you focus on the negative, then you're going to be more sensitive and more likely to see the negative. And if you focus on the positive, then you're going to be more sensitive and focus on what is going on positively in your life. So this is like a muscle that you can build. When you focus on the negative, you're building that muscle to be more sensitive and to focus on the negative. When you're focusing on the positive, you are building that positivity muscle. So I want you to practice focusing on the positive and congratulating yourself for what you're doing well. I want you to be your own cheerleader and focus on all the progress that you're making. You can do this at the end of the day by just reflecting on the things that went well. You can do this on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. Make it a plan so that you are regularly checking in with yourself and congratulating yourself for your progress. Rather than focusing on the tasks that weren't checked off of your to-do list for the day, focus on all of the things that you did accomplish. Even if it didn't meet your expectations, even if you feel like you could have done more, focus on what you've done well, and that will help you to build upon that positivity, and it will essentially accumulate into you being more focused on what you're doing well, which is actually going to help you to do better. Tip number 2 is to practice gratitude daily. Similar to the first one where what you focus on grows, practicing gratitude is an excellent practice to engage in order to focus more on what you appreciate about your life. And when you focus on what you appreciate, that allows you to feel better. It helps you feel happier throughout your day, and it allows you to recognize all of the things that you already have to be grateful for, whether it is these big things like your family, your loved ones, your career, or whether it is small things like a nice cup of tea in the morning or going for a nice walk in the afternoon, or coming home to a pet who's happy to see you. Any of these things are a great way to practice gratitude, and even just naming or writing down 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for daily can go a long way to help you to feel better and more positive. Tip number 3 is to do things that scare you or are out of your comfort zone. And that is because confidence only grows and recognizing your worth only grows when you face your fears and you do the things that scare you. So if there's something that you've been avoiding because it's scary or uncomfortable, then I encourage you to take action, even if it's just one small baby step in the direction of doing that thing that is a little bit out of your comfort zone. So this is going to help you when it comes to that component of recognizing your worth. When you can recognize and celebrate that you were able to do things that maybe you don't think you might be able to do, then that can help you to feel more confident and feel more worthy and less like a failure. Tip number 4 is to set boundaries. So setting boundaries is another way of increasing your self-worth. That's because you are teaching other people how to treat you, and you're teaching yourself how to take care of yourself. Setting boundaries includes things like saying no, taking care of yourself, doing something like raising your fees if you're an entrepreneur or a freelancer, or doing things like setting clear working hours. All of these things help you to raise your self-worth and to feel better about yourself. So setting boundaries is a great way to increase your self-worth. And I want you to reframe it in this way. This is a question that I recently started asking my clients. What would confident blank your name do in this situation? So I would ask, like, what would confident Tati do in this situation? This is something that is making you nervous or anxious, or something that you're not feeling confident in what you would say to somebody in a certain situation. Then ask yourself, what would confident me do in that situation? Visualize them. How would they act? How would they appear physically? Would they be standing up tall? Would they be more assertive in the way that they communicate and in their speech? Would they be more willing to stand up for what they want? So this can be a great quick question to ask yourself in those moments and to visualize and practice how confident you would behave in these situations. So then you can use that as an example and start to act upon it. And tip number 5 is to practice self-compassion. And this is the act of being kind to yourself, because it is human to suffer. You're not alone for feeling this way, and you're doing the best that you can in any moment, and that's all that you can do. It's okay to not always feel your best, and it's pretty normal. So remember to be kind to yourself, and if you're struggling with coming up with words of self-compassion and kindness in a situation, then I want you to think about how you would speak to a friend who was in the same situation that you are right now. What kind of things would you say to them? Would you say, "You've got this, I care about you, I'm here for you, everything's going to be okay"? Any of those words of kindness that you might say to another person, practice saying those words to yourself and recognizing that just because you failed or made a mistake, it does not define you as a person, and it does not make you a failure. That's the separation between specific instances in time and defining yourself by these small things that happen throughout your life. Doesn't matter how many times you fail, doesn't matter how many mistakes you make, you are not a failure. And there's more right with you than wrong with you. So I want you to take what resonates with you from this episode and leave the rest. Practice those things that you feel as though you can start to integrate into your day-to-day life and see how it makes a difference. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Leave me a comment below and let me know what you're thinking. I have other episodes about decreasing anxiety, adopting a healthy mindset, and managing your time and energy. So please check out these episodes here. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Until next time, be calm.